Thank you very much for attending the Arizona Mental Performance Training webinar. We are talking about performance anxiety today. Welcome. And we do have this webinar, and the previous webinars are all posted up on our YouTube channel, so you can go back and watch some of the previous webinars that we had. This will be recorded and uploaded, so you can share it with anyone that you feel would benefit from our discussion. And we plan to host many more, providing information on sport and performance psychology. And we advertise these events on our social media. They also come up on our website under events, so you could follow us, and you can. Sorry, more people are coming in. I'm just trying to make sure I get everybody in. You can receive updates on those by following us on social media. Arizona Mental Performance Training, affectionately known as AMPT. We provide competition-tested, science-backed mental skills which help you develop an elite mindset, learn to use stress and anxiety to your advantage, and regulate emotions to focus your attention and rebound from mistakes. Now, this statement is very important to me. I put a lot of time and effort into this. I'm very attentive to the material that we teach, because I want to ensure our approach is based on recent research, as well as time-tested skills that promote the mind-body connection for optimal performance. The skills we teach are universally applicable, and they apply to every area in your life. We're not just building strong athletes, we are building strong people. Sports are often promoted as a place that provides development for character and life skills because of challenging environments and adversity. But we also have to recognize that these sports competitive environments have the potential to also teach many, many bad lessons, leading to an unhealthy mindset and ineffective coping skills. So mental performance coaching holds you accountable for improving your mental skills for optimal performance, reducing the impacts of stress on mental and physical health, and improves fulfillment, motivation, productivity, and life satisfaction. AMPT operations are primarily focused in the Phoenix metro area, but we are capable of worldwide presence through virtual engagements and travel to in-person events. So if there's something additional that you would like to hear about, learn about, you want us to talk about in our webinars, social media, or you want to talk one-on-one or have our team visit you, we can certainly do that. Today, we're talking about moving from performance anxiety to performance excellence, how to use stress, pressure, anxiety, and adversity to your performance advantage. I wanted to give a heads up that we are recording this. I usually broadcast live, but I'm not doing that today. This will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. So if you want to share this with someone else, or you want to watch it again later, you're welcome to do that. A quick introduction. My name is Neil Wadier. I'm the founder of Arizona Mental Performance Training, and I'm also the director of coaching. I'm the Master of Arts in Performance Psychology. I'm an adjunct professor of psychology at Grand Canyon University, and I'm also the Grand Canyon University men's rugby mental performance coach. Retiring from the Air Force in August. I'm really excited about that. And Brissa has not joined us yet today. We'll see if she pops in, but co-hosting today, Alyssa Martin. You introduce yourself, please.
Yes, hello, my name is Alyssa Martin. I'm a senior at Grand Canyon University. I'm graduating this December with my bachelor's degree in performance psychology, or specifically science of psychology with an emphasis in sports psychology. So my major is focused around helping athletes or teams or teachers, coaches, with improving or maintaining a positive mindset. I'm also part of the GCU men's rugby team as one of the assistant mental performance coaches, in addition to being one of the founding members of the Grand Canyon University Sport and Performance Psychology Club. And then lastly, I am the program director at Kids in Conflict, which is a nonprofit organization working with at-risk youth. And we're currently working on a grant to help and assist the Black and Brown communities to heal from their traumas using leadership skills and other life skills.
Excellent. If Brisa happens to join in, she's also a student at Grand Canyon University. She's also an assistant mental performance coach with the men's rugby team. She's an awesome asset to our team. So I wanted to start talking about understanding performance anxiety. We're talking about this pre-performance feeling. What are we actually talking about here? So I want you to imagine I want you to think about for a moment that your mind is an imagination machine. Think about the last time you watched a sad movie. Why does a sad movie create such strong emotions? Right? You know the movie is not real, even if it's based on real events. You're watching a movie. What about haunted houses? Right? We know that zombies walking in and outside of the haunted houses are not really zombies. Why does it result in such a strong emotional and physical response? The reason is because your mind doesn't know the difference between what is real and what you tell it is real. Your brain's number one job is to keep you safe and alive. It's that classic fight, flight, or freeze emotional trigger response. The problem is we have an unevolved brain in a contemporary world. When you get nervous before a test or a high pressure situation, your brain is responding to a threat. It doesn't know the difference between a real or perceived threat. So when you walk into a test and you're nervous, your brain doesn't know you're walking into a test. It just knows that you are nervous, and therefore it's responding appropriately. It's responding with a strong threat response. So that's where we talk about performance anxiety, that nervous energy prior to any kind of an event. And I mention a lot about taking tests, because a lot of times we're talking about student athletes. So students aren't athletes are not just athletes. They have education to worry about. They have relationships. They have financial. So even whether you're talking about high school, college, even professional athletes, we're not just talking about sports here. Anxiety. The word anxiety is the anticipation of a future event. That's it. Anxiety is anticipation of a future event. And your mental image of an anticipated future results in physical and emotional responses as if you're under threat. If you do not deliberately train yourself to accept stress, pressure, anxiety, and adversity as a normal part of the competitive environment and learn how to use the resulting energy, you will likely experience a decrease in performance. So anxiety can hinder your focus, disrupt your concentration, and it impairs your decision-making abilities. When you experience high levels of anxiety, your attention becomes scattered. It makes it challenging to stay focused on the task at hand. You may experience mental blocks. And this is important whether you're talking about studying a playbook and then you can't remember your plays, or studying materials for an actual hands-on test. You can't remember the testable material, even if you studied and you know the material. If you freak yourself out, if you allow yourself that energy to run out of control, you're going to get those mental blocks. That's a result of pre-performance anxiety. The unchecked performance anxiety can lead to excessive worry, unhealthy self-talk. It undermines your confidence and your belief in your abilities. Physical symptoms can intensify feelings of anxiety. So you think about, you're wondering if you studied good enough for a test, or if you wonder if you know your playbook well enough, and you get that increased heart rate and muscle tension as a result of worrying about all these things. And it further hinders your performance because it affects your coordination and your fine motor skills. This heightened anxiety creates a state of both mental and physical overload, and it's counterproductive to performance. Now, stress, pressure, anxiety, and adversity. These things are inherent to the competitive environment. So the idea of performance anxiety is nothing more than energy produced by your mental imagery resulting from your beliefs and your thoughts about what's about to happen. That's really what we're talking about here. You are, whatever it is that you're feeling, you're creating. If you're nervous, you're probably focused on things you can't control: fear of failure, past negative experiences, evaluation and judgment from other people, lack of preparation, social comparison, right? If you're excited, you're probably focused on things you can control. It doesn't mean the stressful environment changes. What it means is you're bringing a different perspective to the stressful environment, right? High stakes situations, time pressure, and the uncertainty and unpredictability of the competitive environment doesn't change. What changes your ability to bring in a more regulated self to that environment. So recognizing pain points and performance gaps. I touched on this a little bit already. We talk about symptoms. Symptoms are are just that. They're symptoms of the root cause, but it helps us get to there, right? So if you think about a time where you didn't really perform as well, maybe because you were so stressed out, think about what that felt like. What were you thinking about? What were you doing? What were the physical reactions? What was the emotional reactions? What was going through your mind? And these are the kind of things that are going to help you work the situation backwards so that you can become more prepared. So again, the idea of walking into a test, are you going to freak yourself out because this test is really, really important? Even if you've studied really, really well and you know the material, that thought process, the rumination on all the possibilities can lead you to those mental blocks. I want to step backwards one moment because there was one thing that I had in my notes that I forgot. I wanted to bring up. So we were talking about fear of failure as one of the things that I run into a lot with performance anxiety. Later today, we're doing a mental performance workshop with the Grand Canyon University men's rugby team. We're actually doing 4 this summer. The first one is this afternoon. We did a pre-workshop questionnaire, and what I found very, very interesting from the results was 60% of these college rugby players said fear of failure is a top concern. This is a high level. Some of these are already being scouted for professional rugby, international rugby competitions. Some of them are gone this summer right now playing international rugby. And they're talking about fear of failure as a major concern. So what is it about fear of failure that freaks people out so much? We're talking about focusing on past mistakes. We're ruminating on past mistakes. We're focusing on potential future mistakes. We're focusing on judgment by other people, unhealthy comparison. So essentially, we're setting up standards, and we're scared that we're not going to live up to those standards. Is causing a whole bunch of anxiety, and that anxiety is going to be a performance block. Getting back into, we talked a lot about physical symptoms, mental symptoms, self-talk, self-doubt, expecting the worst, obsessing over mistakes, or over analyzing either what happened in the past or what might happen in the future. Emotionally, you might feel out of control. You feel vulnerable, mood swings, because you're expressing all these emotions. You don't know what to do about it. Fear and anxiety and overwhelmingly nervous. Behavioral symptoms could be procrastinating, finding excuses to delay performance. This is actually an example outside of sports. I'm working with a young electrician who has finished his hours needed for his electrical journeyman's license, and he is continuously putting off the exam because he's nervous about it. And so the longer he puts it off, the more nervous he becomes, the longer he puts it off. And so we're trying to work through this thing, and we ended up putting up and just saying, you have to pick a date and work through this, because he's just continually reinforcing this unhealthy cycle of anxiety. And he's doing it to himself. A test is a test. That's just it. It's a test. Your interpretation of the upcoming performance environment is what determines how you feel about that performance environment. So with that, I'm going to let me pop this forward. There you go. Alyssa, go ahead.
Okay, so for sport and performance psychology, it's broken up. There's sport and performance psychology, and then the role of a mental performance coach. So first off, if you don't know, a sport and performance psychologist is a psychologist who works with anyone in some form of physical activity, like the name, specifically in sports, but they can work with any individual in any other career path. Some of the triggers this type of psychologist looks for are, or triggers or factors they may look for are, if you're able to maintain or control your stress and anxiety, if you're able to communicate, working on visualization or imagery skills. And then another one could be different responses you get from your surrounding environments, whether it's from a coworker or a teammate or a coach or a family member. A sport and performance psychologist uses all those different triggers or factors to see how their individual or their client's mindset can change from positive to negative. Also, with a sport and performance psychologist, They, like I said, work with others outside of sports. So some people may, in other career fields, may be a dentist, a surgeon, a police officer, firefighter, etc., actors. They can work with anyone in any type of career field because everyone experiences anxiety or different responses or factors in social environments. An example of that, I have two. One is myself. When I was in high school as a sophomore, I hit my left knee on the hurdle during my 300 race. And after the season was over in the summer, I went to the doctor and I found out if I would have waited a week, I wouldn't be able to run again. So, as an athlete whose passion and desire is in track and field doing hurdles, that took a big toll on my mentality. Yes, I was injured physically, but I was also injured mentally. I got the assistance I needed physically to make sure my knee was okay and that I was back and I was healthy, ready for the next season. But all of my family, my friends, my coaches, my trainers didn't check on how I was doing mentally. So that's what a sport and performance psychologist's goal and their focus is to make sure an athlete's mindset stays positive throughout the entire process, whether it's there is an injury involved or there's not, through an athlete or a team or coach's season, before, during, and after, to make sure they're maintaining a positive mindset. And so this the sport and performance psychologist works hand in hand with a mental performance coach, and that's because for a mental performance coach, some of the benefits they look for similar factors and triggers as a sport and performance psychologist. So breathing, communicating, how you manage your stress, if people's responses trigger something negative for you, whether you don't perform as well. They look at a whole lot of different aspects of an athlete or coach's performance in their sport, in addition to working on creating a structure and guidelines for that individual to use throughout their season, even after their season. As Mr. Wadier, Professor, I call him Professor Wadier, as he was saying, some of the athletes are already nervous about failing to succeed in rugby. And so as a mental performance coach, the job or the task is to make sure we work on different strategies or tools to make sure those athletes get out of that negative mindset because they're not going to be able to perform to the best of their abilities. Then also some of the strategies a mental performance coach will use, similar to, as I said, the psychologist, can include communicating. A lot of people struggle with communicating, feeling that they're going to be rejected or they just don't know how. Breathing techniques, whether it's before an event or a meeting or surgery or what have you, learning how to breathe to calm yourself from the anxiety and the stress struggles or the stressors you may have. Learning how to visualize and use imagery in a positive way instead of a negative way. And then another one could be using the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And if you don't know what that is, it's a pyramid of 5 layers. The first one is the physiological need, which are the basic needs. Anyone needs: food, water, shelter. The next is safety, which is finding security and even money to make sure you are accomplishing your physiological needs. The third is belonging, whether that's in a platonic or romantic way, having relationships in a positive manner. The fourth is esteem, so self-esteem and feeling accomplished, keeping those high and positive. And then the last is self-actualization, which is reaching your full potential, which is something that everyone wants to reach. So as a mental performance coach or even a sport and performance psychologist, the goal is to make sure our clients or our athletes or our teams are able to succeed each level of this hierarchy. And then lastly, the collaboration and role of parents and coaches is very important for everyone, whether it's parent, coaches, or the athletes or psychologists, because whether they realize or not, there's a lot of stressors and factors that play a role on the athlete if parents and coaches or psychologists or doctors, trainers are not on the same page. If a parent doesn't understand why their child does not receive enough play time on the field or court because they're not communicating with their coach, that's going to cause a lot of stressors on the athlete because they feel as though they have to maintain this standard for their parent or for their team or coaches. So making sure everyone involved in the athlete's life are aware of the athlete's goals, their desires, their needs and wants for themselves, their teams as a team member, and for the future are all important. Making sure parents or coaches are living through their athletes or their children and giving them the right amount of support, because if not, that can hinder the athlete's performance later on and possibly not letting them excel outside of their current stage in their sport. Okay.
Great stuff. I love it. And out of that great bit of information, one of the main things that I would like you to take away is there are different levels when we talk about sport and performance psychology. Alyssa had mentioned mental performance coaches. She also mentioned sport psychologists. There's a lot of terms that people throw around, and I think that there's an important distinction that I want you to take away, that there are mental performance coaches and there are sport psychologists. And generally what we're talking about here is a mental performance coach, and that's Brisa, Alyssa, and I are the people that are studying the performance side, not the clinical side. And that's where the big divide is that I really want you to take away, that both are very, very valuable. And a mental performance coach can do very, very good things. But as soon as we start heading into that clinical side of mental health counseling, that's where the edges of our expertise, our education, and our ethical boundary lies, and that we have others that we work with who handle those things, whether they be designated clinical psychologists, mental health counselors, or a sports psychologist who might do both the performance and the clinical side. A lot of people that I've talked to that are sports psychologists with the clinical education and background, a lot of times they tend to flow one way or the other. A good friend of mine does performance consulting, but she tends to lean more towards that counseling side. And then she a lot of times will hand off to either people that she works with or trusted mental performance coaches who then can go be fully dedicated to that performance side. So that's a really important designation. And something that we have to be very cautious of is that we, as mental performance coaches, we stay within our role, is helping with performance. Brisa was able to jump in. Thanks for joining us. Great timing, because now we're going to be talking about building resilience and mental fortitude. You ready to go?
Oh my gosh, yes. I was struggling so hard to even get in. But yeah, so I'm going to be talking about the building resilience and mental fortitude. So there's ways for us to, as sports psychologists and just athletes, just individuals overall, that could develop mental resilience in order to drive under pressure. So like I believe they mentioned before I joined, that performance anxiety affects athletes, but as well as everyday people. So a couple of mental resilience ways that could help you thrive under pressure is positive self-talk. So being able to point out what you did good instead of using them, focusing on the mistakes, because focusing on the mistakes will just have your mindset focused on that mistake, and instead of being present in the moment. Without being present in the moment, you won't be able to improve your skill set or be able to be present for you to perform at your top performance, basically at your top level. So a way to improve that is just being able to like use those mistakes of like, oh, okay, what can I do next time for this mistake not to happen again? And that could be as time goes on, of course. So it's a continuous loop. So it's not going to be done over time. It's like a continuous forever thing. So as you improve those skills, you'll be able to fix it for next time you are going to undergo that same mistake. Then setting realistic goals. That goes also to positive self-talk. If you set realistic small goals, as you check off those goals that you accomplished, that boosts your confidence level, and it will be beneficial for you in the long run, especially if you're like a public speaker or an athlete, like I'm assuming most of you guys are. But setting those realistic goals will help you in the long run as well, and boost your confidence, and a lot with mental health as well. Practicing mindfulness. So Neil, my professor Neil, I had a couple of his courses throughout last semester, and one thing that we did a lot was the gratitude post. it's gonna be talked about or brought up again sooner or later. But those posts helps you think about like the small everyday things, like, and not being able to not taking those things for granted. That could also help you out, boosting that mental resilience under pressure and everything like that. Just focusing on those positive aspects. Another mental resilience is building a support system. It could be a friend, it could be family members, but it's always good to have that support system to lean on, because we can't do this alone. As you have to have someone there for you. It could be a teacher, family members, friends, teammates, just someone who will be there for you always, but then also be real with you and provide that support system, like emotionally, physically, etc. Next one on my list is visualizing success. So being able to picture yourself being successful in that moment. And especially during competitions. Like, for example, I'm a big basketball person. So, like, I know Stephen Curry, one of the, I think, #1 3-point shooters in the league right now, or overall. So what he does, he just pictures himself making that basketball in the hoop, and he just does this constantly. So whenever, like, he has a hot hand or any player who's like on the field, you have to picture yourself doing that motion or act. And if you keep having that in your head, you provide that and be able to perform at that high level that you're want to set yourself for. Then lastly, one of the main big goals that a lot of people and athletes don't tend to like go for is seeking professional help. Like, we're sports psychologists, mental coaches, psychologists. We just focus more on the mental aspect, so we don't go into, like Neil was saying, not into the clinical part. But for sure, like, if you are struggling and don't feel comfortable talking to like a family member or anyone close to you, definitely seek help from a professional. Then lastly, I'll be talking about embracing challenges and viewing failure as an opportunity for growth. So going upon developing mental resilience, it takes time. Those abilities have to be constantly worked on. And by applying these strategies that you take upon, you could thrive in under pressure situations, building confidence and being able to achieve those challenging situations in the future. And instead of seeing mistakes, you'll see success. So by embracing the mistakes, you gotta view those mistakes instead as an opportunity to grow. Remember, you are in control of your own actions and thoughts and mind. The emotion aspect is just the outcome of that in-present thing. You gotta think about, is this mistake or whatever I'm feeling going to be affecting me in the future? Or, like, do I need this in my future? So you just got to think about that and replace those negative thoughts as well as positive affirmations. So you got to tell yourself, okay, I might have messed up here, but next time I could use that as a learning experience and use it in my practice and work on it throughout the weeks and improve until your next game or next performance or anything like that. And you also have to, along with that, you also have to remind yourself about past successes. Those successes are there for you to help you strengthen your focus and then also help you take advantage of them as well. So just remind yourself every day of that. It might be hard, like I said, it's a continuous thing. So the more you work on it, the more it become a habit, and naturally you'll just be more confident in your performance and have less anxiety. And I think that should be.
Yeah, that's good. Covering great information. And Alyssa, you want to talk about some other techniques?
Yes. So for the section that I'm talking about, I'm focusing on the negative aspects, specifically with, as Gracie said, positive self-talk. I'm going to be talking about negative self-talk and how that can really affect an athlete and those techniques. And so if you don't know, negative self-talk is when an athlete or individual thinks or tells himself negative things about themselves, whether it's you're not able to do this, you're not ready, you're not comfortable, you didn't prepare enough, just really putting themselves down to where they cannot accomplish their goal or task. And so this can really impact an individual or athlete because you're hindering your self-esteem and even your self-fulfillment. Going back to the hierarchy of needs, those two levels, those two stages aren't going to be accomplished if you use self-talk because you're not building yourself in a positive way. And so some common triggers you may see are athletes will set unrealistic expectations or goals for themselves. If a football player, wide receiver says, I'm going to make 30 touchdowns in a game and makes one, well, you're going to start negative self-talking because you've made such a high standard for yourself. Another trigger is comparing yourself to other people, whether you watch clips or highlights of the competition, or you see their times from a race, or you just see different things or hear different things about the competition, or even someone on your team, that can even lead you to participating in negative self-talk because you're looking, instead of focusing on yourself, you're focusing on others around you. And so if you don't think you're doing the best you can or as better as the other people, you will start to think negative of yourself. And then lastly, some techniques, or not lastly, but some techniques you can use for negative self-talk to prevent it. As I said before, breathing techniques, communicating, really working on different strategies to prevent negative self-talk, whether that's imagery or, as Brisa said, the gratitudes. Those are two separate ways or options for someone to use, whether you use the gratitude notes or letters of gratitude, looking back on those when you feel as though you're going in a negative mindset, and looking how you've been doing or different, things in that area. And then I wanted to mention the difference between, because I know Brisa talked about more positive. So the difference between negative self-talk and normal nervousness, which is positive, is people can use the fight or flight response, as Professor Niels mentioned earlier. And so the fight response can correlate with normal nervousness because in your brain, your body's triggered with adrenaline, your eyes dilate, your heart beats and pumps crazy. And so with the fight response, your body is telling you, oh my gosh, I'm nervous, I'm anxious, but we can handle this. And so you want to go for the obstacle or charge the challenge. That's similar with the normal nervousness because you're anxious and your adrenaline is pumping, but you're able to help yourself in a positive way of attacking that challenge or accomplishing that goal you set for yourself. And the flight response correlates similar with the fight, the same reactions. Your blood is pumping, your adrenaline, your eyes are dilated, all this stuff. But the flight response, you're in a negative mindset. So you're thinking more negative of yourself, like I didn't prepare long enough. If you're a surgeon or you're a business person, like for this meeting, I could have told myself beforehand, I didn't read my notes long enough, or I didn't prepare. I should have added this. Oh, I can't do this. That's the same response with the flight and negative self-talk, because instead of attacking the challenge or the obstacle or accomplishing your goals, you're running away from it. And so negative self-talk and building confidence, they're two very important things athletes and individuals need to work on to make sure you're staying positive, because if you don't, you're hindering your confidence and your self-esteem, and that can definitely affect you later on in your sports or in your job or other career path.
Great job. And to round that out, which she presented really nicely, is sometimes I like to change the idea between positive and negative. Sometimes people associate positive with good, negative with bad. And really what we're talking about here is not necessarily labeling good and bad, but what's productive and what's counterproductive, what's healthy and what's unhealthy. Because what's effective for one person in one particular situation may not be healthy and effective for them in another situation, or what's good for one person is not good for another person. So it's really person specific and situation specific. And so I actually try to remove terms like positive and negative and really try to focus on what's healthy, what's productive, or what am I doing, or what can I avoid that's unhealthy and unproductive. And that because that not only does that change the perspective, but it also puts the emphasis back on the person, because this is something I can control, right? It's not just positive, negative. It's what am I doing or what can I do to really put a healthy spin on this, or to make a more productive behavior change, right? So there's a lot of emphasis on the personal. Everything that we're talking about here is happening inside of an individual. So that's something that's always really helped me out. So when we talk about practical strategies, pre-competition, pre-performance, right? We talked about anxiety is the anticipation of a future event and the physical and emotional responses associated with how you think about that upcoming event. What are your beliefs about yourself and your preparation and the circumstances that you're going into? That is what creates pre-performance anxiety. Anxiety is nothing more than energy created by our interpretation of what we're about to experience. So if you can have a better pre-performance routine, pre-competition routine, you are more likely to put yourself into the mindset and the attitude and have the physical, mental, and emotional responses that you're looking for. But here's the trick. You don't wait until game day to open up your playbook. You can't do the same. You can't do this with mental performance either. So pre-performance routines, pre-competition routines have to be practiced. One of the really popular mental skills coaches that I follow, he was talking about working with MMA fighters, and they would go as far as to a couple nights before the actual fight, they would reserve time in the actual arena that they were going to fight in, and they would practice their walk from the locker room or from their prep room all the way to the ring or the cage or whatever is at the, boxing or MMA. And they would practice it. They would practice their walk. They would practice the speed. They would practice everything they're saying to themselves so they could recreate, or they could pre-create the event, so that when they get to the event, it's no longer stressful. They've already done it. I've done this with really successfully with a sprinter that I worked with. Sprint, when you go to a track and field event, a lot of times the sprint events are really, really exciting, which means they happen last. So as a sprinter who runs, this person ran the 100-meter, 200-meter, and they were part of a 4x100. So they sit around all day long waiting for their event. And so what I taught this person to do, rather than sitting and stewing, is take that idea of that mental imagery and use it to your advantage. Every 15 minutes, sit down and visualize yourself pre-performance into your starting block, getting ready, the gun goes off, and we created this entire mental image of him running his race. So as he's from, 8 o'clock in the morning when they get there and the competition starts until his race starts, that afternoon, a couple hours later, he's already ran his race 50, sometimes 100 times. So when he walks into onto the track to get ready to step into the starting block and get himself ready to race, he is completely relaxed because he's already imagined himself do this 50 to 100 times all throughout the day. And that's the power of a pre-performance routine. Now, here's the other thing to be aware of. You have to understand the difference between routines and superstitions. Because there are some people, and I use the example of, there's some baseball pitchers who, running from the dugout to the pitcher's mound, want to step over the line. You can't step on the line. Well, what happens if you accidentally trip and you accidentally touch that line? Is your whole inning gonna go to hell because now you touched the line and you're worried about the superstition? It's completely ridiculous, and it's something that we have to take situations like that, thought processes and beliefs like that, and completely remove them from the scenario. Everything that you do in pre-performance routines has to be focused on what you can control. And 99% of what you can control is inside of you. You can't control the performance environment. You shouldn't try to remove. We're not talking about stress removal or stress management. When we say stress management, we're not managing the environment. The environment is the environment, right? You have to manage how you work on yourself, your thoughts, your beliefs, your emotional reactions, and how your body responds to what you're telling it and your belief system, so that you can present your best self to the performance environment. That's what we're talking about here. So when we talk about pre-performance routines, pre-competition routines, we're talking about all these skills that Brisa and Alyssa were talking about, practicing these skills ahead of time so that when it comes time to engage in a pre-performance routine, you have already practiced effective and healthy self-talk. You have already practiced progressive muscle relaxation. You have practiced visualization and simulations. There's all this mental imagery. So everything that you do has already happened in your mind. So you walk in and all you have to do is what you've already done. That is effective pre-competition routine. And that is how you take performance anxiety and you move it to performance excellence. So recap. Number one, you have to deliberately train your mental skills. Number two, build confidence so you're ready for that performance anxiety, and understand that stress, pressure, anxiety, and adversity are part of the competitive environment. They're not things to avoid. They are not things to overcome. You have to learn how to use that energy to your advantage. We're not talking about a response to stress. We're talking about a stress response, your internal stress response. Okay, so wanted to make sure that we had enough time, and we do. We're actually really good on time right now. So I wanted to see if anybody, you can either type it into chat or you can turn on your microphone and ask the question. Does anybody have any questions concerning pre-performance anxiety or some type of performance routines or mental skills associated with pre-competition routines? Lynette, you got your hand up. Go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon. And it's not necessarily a question, more of a comment. I'm just very impressed. This is my first time on your platform, and I'm very impressed not only by the mythology that you guys are doing, but I'm very impressed by your speakers or your assistants, the coaches, the mental staff we work with. I'm the co-founder of Kids in Conflict, and I'm the executive director. And I spend a lot of time mentoring kids in juvenile hall, and just the mental state and that anxiety is very important. And so I really appreciate the study that you guys are doing and willing to work with youth and athletes that are struggling mentally with overcoming some of the traumas and those anxieties that they're dealing with. So thank you very much for this platform.
Well, and Alyssa, that's your area of expertise, right? You're working to bring the idea of mental skills coaching, sport and performance psychology to that organization. Take a couple minutes and talk about what are you doing and where are you going with that mentality?
Okay, so with our nonprofit, like I said before, we work with at-risk youth in all different communities. So we use a lot of the information that we talked about today. We actually do incorporate that when working with our kids. They are either in the system or trying to go in the process of not joining the system. And so working on understanding other people's perspectives, understanding their wrongdoing or their opinions on what they need to improve on, and just learning different life skills and challenges that they need to know for the future. That's something that we continue to incorporate with our kids. And so mentality is something that we do notice a lot of people may have struggles with, because, as I said, we're working on that grant, working with the Black and Brown communities to improve and possibly prevent or reduce different traumas from their past, using leadership skills and life skill tools, mentality, imagery, gratitude letters. I'm incorporating everything that we've talked about with those kids to help them prevent those issues from increasing or even changing their mentality altogether permanently later on down the line. And so we're working with Sacramento. We have a couple conferences that I will be attending to help explain and go in more depth about our grant and what we're going to be doing. And so we have a lot of staff that take time out of their day, whether it's through mentoring or just through teaching their classes. I do teach to explain and help the kids with understanding the different areas and how they are impacted, whether it's intentional or not, and how they can prevent those things from increasing or getting worse over time.
Nice. I love it. Great job. So I'm going to throw this out to Alyssa and Brisa. I didn't tell them I'm going to do this. I'm going to put them on the spot. So a lot of people that I talk to are actually parents, grandparents, coaches. I talk to a lot of athletes, but there's a lot of parents and coaches that want to know, how can we support? So how do you, out of everything we've talked about, how can parents and coaches best support athletes to learn to effectively deal with use performance anxiety?
Well, I guess I'll start off. Well, definitely, like I mentioned previously, like definitely being like a support system for them. Like it's understandable if parents like don't know much about the sport or whatever their kid is doing or participating in. But as long as they're being there and hearing them out, just being there for them, especially emotionally and mentally, it could be hard at times for athletes, kids, the youth, to be understood by parents. It could probably be like a generational difference or like ethical difference as well, or just nationality, origin, and ethnic. But definitely being there for them, trying to understand where they're coming from, and definitely do research to like so they feel like they're being heard and cared for, but then also like being there in the sidelines or just there for them, present the moment for sure.
And to kind of go off of what Brisa said, as we've talked about, being there for the athletes is definitely important. Every parent has their own way of doing it, but ensuring it's not overstepping or adding more pressure to their kids, I think, is something a lot of parents should consider if they don't, because they may have good intentions but it may be overload. So just taking the time to speak with their kids or with their athletes to see what they need help with and trying to help them structure out those things that they need. If it's recovering, or hey, I'm interested in a trainer, okay, well, let's set up some times to look for those trainers, making sure that their kids feel supported from them and not just as though you don't care. Maybe it's not a sport you're interested in, but at least making your child feel as though you do care. Like Brisa said, looking it up, finding videos, that can really help the kids with doing better, because there's videos everywhere where the kids don't see their family members in the crowd, and the kids that do, even though they may not be as good as the sport or their event or whatever they're participating in, when you see your families there and your support system, you feel better. You feel like it builds your self-esteem and your confidence that you can do better because there's people in your corner. And to piggyback on what I talked about earlier with my program and our nonprofit, we have our parenting facilitator who works with parents to show them how important their role is in their kids' life. So even it's a little off topic, but even identifying your struggles or your issues. So with me, I have a 2-year-old who's interested in running and playing soccer and baseball and all of that. Since I got injured, I haven't been able to track the way I wanted to. I'm making sure I'm mentally capable of supporting my son with doing his sports without intervening or putting all of my dreams and goals on him. And so finding people to work with to prevent that issue is also something parents should consider, if they were interested in a sport and it fell through or they're not able to.
Yeah, and something you said is really, really important. Simplicity is key. The younger the athlete is, we actually had on one of our previous webinars, the question was, how young can you teach mental skills? Well, the response is, how simple can you make it? The simpler you can make it, the more you can break it down, the more the younger it can be applied, and the more it's valuable. We have a 11 and a 9-year-old, and I've been using them these kind of skills with them for 2-3 probably longer years. During COVID, we'd take them to the skate park, and at 8, 9, 10 years old, they're using mental skills to overcome their fear or of falling, whether it be I'm scared of getting hurt, or I'm just scared of looking silly, right? So the younger you can, the more you can break this down, the younger you can implement it. But that's also even for older student athletes who have never used these things. We need to start simple and do the simple things really, really well, and then we can add more complexity to it. Casey had a really good question. When you're noticing yourself doing the negative self-talk or having negative thoughts during a game, is there anything to implement quickly so the entire game is not ruined? I want to use an example here. So one of the athletes I was working with a little over a year ago, he's a junior in high school and had ambitions to play football at a high level. And he was a wide receiver, and he had a really hard time, as with wide receivers. They might get a ball thrown to them every 4 or 5, sometimes 10, 15 plays. It could be a long time. And suddenly you get one chance and you make a mistake Are they going to trust you to come back to you again? And so the idea here was, well, how do I overcome after a mistake? And so what we talked about was, in football being specific, was we broke it down into 10 seconds, because you imagine from snap to end of play, usually about 10 seconds. 10 more seconds, you're back in the huddle. The huddle to the line of scrimmage, about another 10 seconds. So what we talked about is, Lou Holtz, the classic football coach, used to talk about, what's your win? What's important now? What can you do? And this, again, goes into a really complex layer of making sure that we're teaching this appropriately, because people have to understand, what can I control? The only thing I control is myself, my emotional reaction. I can't control the weather. I can't control the referee's bad calls. I can't control that my coach won't throw the ball to me anymore, right? All I can do is focus on myself. Breathing techniques for immediate physical relaxation, release of that muscle tension, the brain fog. Then you can get into effective self-talk, which again needs to be practiced. We talk about performance cues and power statements. Simple things that you can say, simple, repeatable statements, right? It could be motivational. I got this. I got this. I got this. Let's go, right? It could be instructional, right? A football player, we talk about hands up, look the ball into your hands, right? Little things. What can you do to practice these things ahead of time, so then you can put them into practice situations, so then you can apply them in performance situations. The more you have to think during a performance environment, the less effective you're going to be, which is why practice is, so most coaches, the effective coaches, will break the game down into segments, and then you slowly build the segments up together until you get into an environment where you don't really have to think anymore. You're just performing on instinct. The more you have to think, the less effective you are. You want to be able to go on instinct. So by practicing these things ahead of time, both Alyssa and Brisa both mentioned gratitude practice. This is very, very valuable for building optimism and looking at challenges as opportunities. Pick 3 things in the last 24 hours and start journaling on what these things, good things, mean to you, right? That builds optimism over time. Self-talk, practice self-talk statements, practice breathing techniques, practice progressive muscle relaxation. All these skills have to be practiced ahead of time. So if you talk about how can someone combat negative self-talk during a game, you have to go to practice. And then before practice, you have to develop these things and bring them into practice. And no one thing is going to solve all of your issues. There has to be a toolbox of skills that you use in the appropriate situations, and then eventually use what I call skill stacking, where I'm going to use breathing techniques with self-talk, with progressive muscle relaxation, with mindfulness meditation, right? It's no different than, how do you become a good basketball player? I learn to dribble, and then I dribble while I'm running, then I shoot, then I do layups, then I do 3-points, and you start skill stacking. You have to practice things ahead of time. And so it's not to say that I can't give you a straight answer. There's a lot of things you can do. Self-talk is a product of how you view the environment. So if you find yourself talking negative, or talking in an unhealthy way that does not enhance your performance, the number one thing to do is take a breath, pause, and say, what is important now? What can I do right now? Because sometimes thoughts just happen, and sometimes it's hard to stop negative thoughts. So another good way to stop a negative thought is to go do something that is productive, and then you're reinforcing the behavior. So I definitely love this conversation, and I could talk about it for a long time. If there's any others, is there anything specific, like a specific example that you would have about that? You can definitely pop that in, or you can even come off of mute and ask the question. But I would also ask Brisa and Alyssa, is there anything that you wanted to add to that?
I think you just covered everything, honestly, or for more than what I could say. But yeah, you definitely went like in depth for that question. I'm not sure if she had like a specific question she had, but you had a great answer for her.
I agree. There's not much you can add to that. I know when we were talking in our classes, we brought up some type of scenario like that, specifically with a coach, and they have issues throughout the game or something of the sort. So possibly even start self-talk during a game maybe asking to be pulled off to the side to take a second to re-evaluate and to calm yourself down so that you're not performing negatively during the game, so that your coach knows, I need a second, I'm not all right, I messed up too bad, I need a breather. Some people tend to say that does help, but you kind of covered everything for.
And yeah, mistakes, that's one of the things that I talk a lot about. The first step of accepting that stress and pressure, anxiety, and adversity are part of the competitive environment helps you accept the fact that you're going to make mistakes. It's part of it. It's part of the performance environment, right? The stress and pressure and the fact that you make a mistake, you have to accept that, yeah, it happened. How many things, I said this in class one time and everybody kind of stumped everybody. How many mistakes have you made that are in the past? All of them. Every mistake, that, right? Because it's already happened. You can't do anything about it. And I talked to my football player about this. Let's say, in a simple play, it's you run 5 yards and you run out and the quarterback throws it to you and you see the ball coming into your hands. And just before it hits your fingers, you turn because you want to go upfield and you want to make a play, right? And what does it do? It goes off the tip of your fingers and everybody's like, how do you miss such an easy play? Well, so in that situation, how do you overcome that when you have about 10 seconds to recover before the next play is in the huddle being called? You have to be able to do that. And it really comes down to practicing breathing techniques, mindfulness, self-talk. You have to practice these things ahead of time. Beach volleyball is another example. We talk about this a lot. If you're in a really, really close game, let's say you're in a championship game and it's two really good teams and you win the first set 21-18, that means you gave up 18 points. That's a lot of points. But that's the inherent part of the game. Even in a win, you still gave up 18 points. 18 times you had to overcome the fact that something didn't go your way. And so in order to win those close games that you're inherently going to be part of, you have to be ready to reset. And it's actually even quicker in beach volleyball. Like a football player might have 10, 15, 20, maybe even 30 seconds. Beach volleyball, you might have 10 seconds and the next serve is on. Right. And that's if you like hand up and you try to slow the game down. How do you overcome a mistake very, very quickly? You have to tell yourself that mistakes are part of the game. The other thing that you can do, and I found this is really, really powerful. Anytime you make a mistake, in order to think about the mistake, is you don't focus on the mistake, right? Whatever the mistake was, you replace it in your mind with what you meant to do. That way, every time you think about making a mistake, you are not thinking about the mistake, because we talk about whatever you think about grows. And if you think about mistakes, or you have a fear of failure, you have a fear of making mistakes, you are inevitably going to make those mistakes. So the thing that you want to do is, say a wide receiver, the ball goes off the fingertips, or, somebody in beach volleyball, you get a spike and you're in really good position, but you just mishit it. Okay, so it's done. For the next 2, 3, 5 seconds, whatever you have, is you say, oh, well, that's what I meant to do. I meant to turn my arms this way and get a really good bump out of it. So that way you're not focused on the mistake, right? The mistake happened. Got it. It's in the past. You can't do anything about it. But you can do something about future performance, focused on what you meant to do. So that way you're not ruminating on bad things. Rumination isn't a bad thing. Rumination means that whatever you think about grows. But this is why gratitude is so important, because you can also ruminate on good things. You can ruminate on what you meant to do. And therefore, the correct action is reinforced in your mind. And so that could be a really good one for you, is if you make a mistake in a fast-paced game where you have to quickly reset, you need to practice those mental imagery. You've got to practice the self-talk, practice breathing techniques, and just keep telling yourself that making errors is part of performance. This is part of the performance environment. Okay, so I know we're at time, but I wanted to see if there's anybody else had anything else, any questions, concerns, comments that you want to throw out to us. We are definitely going to be having more mental performance workshops. I would like to be doing these at least twice a month. So definitely look for on our website Follow us on the social media. We're going to be presenting a lot more of these and bringing in some of our more of our well-rounded team at Arizona Mental Performance. Is not just about mental performance. We're building a very big team. We have professionals in nutrition, physical therapy, chiropractic, and neurology optimization. I can't even say it. Some really, really smart people doing some really, really awesome things. And then, of course, Brissa, Alyssa, we have Taylor and Amaya are also students who are coming up through the sports psychology education, trying to give them opportunities so that they come out and practice their talks and practice the information and the education that they're learning. I love that they are coming out here and being part of this organization and helping in their own way. So Alyssa and Brissa, thank you very much for your time. Thank you everybody else that showed up. Really looking forward to seeing you on our next webinar. So follow us on social media so that you get all of the information. And speaking of that, get to my last slide if I can get my computer to work. There you go. So we're on all the social medias. And of course, you can contact me directly if you need anything. I generally on social media go by Mental Coach Neil, and Arizona MPT.com. So Alyssa, Brissa, thanks for your time. Everyone else, we will see you next time. Thanks for showing up.